Recently, Dennis Dunbar and I did a live stream again, like we often do, little mini retouching classes, if you will, little Q&A sessions, and we're going to do more live streams. But recently, we did one where we were talking about what he calls his divide and conquer method, which is basically attacking the luminosity and the color of an image, the luma and the chroma, independently via blend modes, right? He was using different curves, or rather curves layers in different blend modes and multiple copies of curves layers to, again, make those changes. And one thing that I thought was really cool that I had never realized was that you could use a curves layer on color blend mode, but then modify the RGB curve to reduce the saturation in the highlights, and then the other direction to reduce the saturation in the shadows and everything in between. It was effectively sort of like a saturation shift, which I thought was super interesting because I'd never actually done that or realized it. Not entirely sure how I'd use it, but it's still pretty cool. And being me, I decided I'm going to try this out. And so I did on various color charts and whatnot. So I started playing around with my usual color charts when I want to analyze what something is doing. And I brought 3 out today for you guys to look at. This is just a demo for whatever reason that you might find beneficial. I don't know. So about 3. These are usually my 3 main ones that I work with when I'm trying to see what color is doing. We have the maximum, which is ProPhoto RGB 32. Now, 32-bit images, which is what that is, this file is set up that way. 32-bit images are not going to be terribly useful for you when it comes to just regular day-by-day editing. 32-bit has its purpose. People immediately jump to like HDR when they talk about 32-bit, and that's definitely true. But also some more advanced high-end imaging, especially for like 3D animation, things of that nature. When it comes to like rendering and rasterizing light effects and things like that, 32-bit has its purpose in and out of Photoshop. But I just do this here to kind of see what it's looking like when I'm trying things out, to see how it responds. And then, of course, Adobe RGB 16-bit is a little more common. I think most people use that. That's absolutely brilliant, perfect, great color. And then sRGB 8 is more of a internet standard, if you will, kind of like where everything kind of ends up eventually on the web. And the amount of color differences here is radical. So basically an 8-bit image gives us maximum of 16.7 million colors, which sounds like a lot until you think about what 16-bit can do. And that's 281 trillion colors. Yeah, it's exponential. And then 32-bit, it gives us 79.2 quintillion colors, which is astronomical to say the least. You can't really process that. And we can get theoretical discussions about 64-bit and 128-bit and all that. But that's a whole discussion, and it's definitely out of my pay grade. But for now, what I want to show you guys is some analyses with curves in different blend modes and see what it does. I was just curious about it. So I have these actions that I created. So on each one, I'm going to create this hue, saturation, luminosity, vertical kind of thing. It's created with gradients in Photoshop. So this is literally like creating data with the maximum amount of bit depth available per file. So this is sRGB 8. It looks like that. Okay. And then this is what it's going to look like in Adobe RGB 16. It's going to be hard to notice. I'm going to explain in a minute. And then usually we get a pretty radical result on the 32-bit file. Looks pretty different. And that there's some reasons for that as well. But first things first, I want to mention all of this. First of all, my screen, in this case, a MacBook Pro, can show these colors pretty well, but it is not capable of showing true 32-bit. Okay, guaranteed it's not. And so I'm seeing a representation. On top of that, you guys are seeing a YouTube video, which has been processed, recorded on my Mac, and then processed in Premiere, and then exported to YouTube. And we're talking about lots of generation loss there in terms of bit depth and color. So everything you guys are seeing is a simulation. What I'm seeing is basically a simulation. But what you guys are seeing is an even less fidelity simulation, okay? Just to be clear. No matter, we can still get the idea across. So if things look on this video, which I'm going to find out in a minute, if things look extra weird and lots of extra banding that I don't expect, I'll make a note of that in the video on the edit. But let's go ahead and take a look at what we're talking about here. So again, if you watch that live stream, then you'll have seen that Dennis and I, or rather Dennis was showing us in a really cool way what curves can do. So let's start with the sRGB 8. Put out the curves for a minute. Let's just use it as is first, right? We're going to go up, and you can see, and we go down. We're moving on a curve, so you can see that's very pleasing, and it's not very difficult to understand if you're not used to it. It's very, very pleasing, right? Oh, and by the way, I guess I should explain this sort of bright line in the middle. So what you're looking at is basically a Granger chart, okay? And that line, if you will, that perceived line, what it represents is that certain hues have a more limited range of achievable saturation at any given luminosity due to the nature of the RGB color model and the limitations of color spaces like sRGB or Adobe RGB or whatever, right? Okay, so that line marks the point at which a hue reaches its maximum saturation or gamut boundary. And I'm reading that quote. It's very true. It's a true statement, but it might be difficult to understand if you're not into this kind of thing, right? And so beyond that, the colors, basically cannot maintain smooth transitions, so they appear constrained, right? So basically, as you approach very bright or very dark, like with high or low luminosity, some hues cannot maintain saturation smoothly. Okay, that's basically what's going on. So that's like a restriction that kind of creates a visible boundary. And what's interesting is that on 32-bit, that visible boundary is almost invisible. It's still basically there. You can still see the basics of it. But with all that extra data, 32-bit doesn't really have it. All right, so that point aside, let's play around with curves a little bit more. So we brightened it up and down, and that was cool. Let's go ahead and put it on color. This is what Dennis was showing the other day, and it's super cool. Apart from being able to modify the RGB channels directly for coloring purposes, he mentioned that if you pull the curve up to the left and down to the right, that you shift the saturation, if you will. So saturation focus is what I'm calling it. So let's try that. Let's move up to the left. We're on sRGB 8. Sure enough, as we pull up, the highlights desaturate. As we pull down, the shadows desaturate, which is super cool. Now, if you go past the threshold where that curve hits a hard edge, then things start getting very, very interesting, as you can see. But in a functional, practical range, that's exactly what is happening. I'm not doubting Dennis, but that's super cool because I never thought about that. It is literally a saturation focus shift. That is super, super cool. If you pull down this node all the way down, then you get a full desat. Same thing happens if you pull in the other direction up, you get a full desat. But if you pull side to side, then you start getting some interesting results. It's more of a hard line desat. And if you go all the way, you get that, which is kind of difficult to understand what's happening there. And there it is in the opposite direction. Okay. When you see this, it kind of takes the mystery out of curves sometimes. When you see a color chart, we're going to try the other bit depth and color spaces in a minute, color modes in a minute. So let's try red for a minute. Okay. And let's pull red to the left. We're still on the sRGB 8. You can kind of see what's happening. Linearly moving red. See that? And then we move it down. You can see what's happening. It's very straightforward. And let's go ahead and put it on green so we can have something in the middle. You can see we're pulling green out and then we're widening green. See how that works? So it kind of, like I said, takes the mystery out of it, which is why a curve, by the way, exists as opposed to these linear changes. Because when you do it with a curve within limits, the change is very smooth. The upshot of this is that your image, it looks cool, whatever it is you're trying to do, or potentially cool, right? Let's try this on our Adobe RGB 16-bit. We're going to drag the curves layer over, still on color blend mode. Let's try this desat of the lows. Yeah, a little cleaner. Desat of the highs. Yeah, it's definitely a little cleaner. We have a little more range, which is cool. And let's try it on the 32. Now, 32-bit file, when you have a file on 32-bit, some tools look different, including curves. So if I pull down, as you can see, we're getting a desat, but immediately, why are we seeing still color in that area? Again, we're seeing a simulation, okay? You notice we still have saturation in the shadows. That's because the way it works in 32-bit is slightly different. There's actually more information in what appears to be black or what appears to be white than meets the eye, and certainly more than 16-bit. I don't want to go into it too much, but basically in 32-bit images, each color channel, red, green, and blue, that stores data as what they call 32-bit floating point numbers rather than integers, right? Does that make sense? So unlike, integer formats like in 8 and 16-bit, floating point allows for different things, a lot more like fractional control. That brings up a whole discussion of like absolute luminance and some other things. But basically the point is that the way that the chart is made using the action that I created, it doesn't account for that because it's designed mostly for 16-bit, right? So to get a dark and light area on the top and bottom on this chart, I'd have to do another step, right? Or just modify the action in general. But it just gives you an idea of how color is processed. But you can see no matter that we are desaturating the lower luminosities and then desaturating the higher luminosities, which is really cool. And if we go to our reds and do the same test again, we can see how we pull the red out. And then we can increase the red You see how it reacts very differently. So let's leave that on 32. Let's go to our red. We're still in color blend mode. Let's bring it to the left. You see how different it is. There's a lot more data, obviously, in the 32. And there's other ways to manipulate that data that I'm not accounting for in the setup that I have. So that's why 32 is like a whole different animal. And the upshot of it, apart from just, you know, like I said, HDR is what most people think about. It's super cool. It's something I know only a little bit about, and it's a lot of fun, but it's not anything that's going to benefit your images in terms of like making rad images in photography. If you are doing HDR, whether it's classic 20-year ago HDR that looks really corny that everybody now laughs at, or you're doing some kind of HDR function for a very practical, subtle reason, 32-bit is a good way to like layer multiple exposures and things like that. That's because of all the data that's in there. And if we were to go to the 8-bit sRGB, oops, let's go to the red channel, excuse me. Okay. All right, so you can see these are perceptively similar, but you see there's more color saturation in the 16, at least I hope so. I don't know what the video is going to look like. Okay, but the sRGB has a lot more limited. So by the way, I did give you the numbers that are involved in 8-bit, 16, and 32, but keep in mind that we're also sRGB, Adobe RGB, and ProPhoto RGB, which means that there's even a wider difference, okay? So this file over here, let's go ahead and just reset that. The 32-bit file in question that I have open does not have a little more data than the 8-bit. It has exponentially more data, and it's an absurd amount of data. But either way, I thought this was cool. It was a kind of a cool demo. Another thing we can do, honestly, let's go to the 16, which is where most of us live, right? Let's put a hue and saturation layer out. I'm going to put it in color blend mode. This is another way to, again, kind of demystify how these things work. If I go to, for example, cyans, if I desaturate it, I just desaturated a bar down the middle. Pretty straightforward, right? So let's go ahead. Actually, you know what? Let's not do cyans. That's a pain in the butt to mess with. Let's go for reasons. Let's go to yellow and desaturate it. See, there you go. Very, very straightforward. We just removed that. Now down here on hue and saturation, we also have some options for this range, right? We can increase the range or we can move it too. Watch this. So if I move it, and just moving that desaturated area. See that? Pretty straightforward. If I increase the blend, the fade, or the ramp, okay, so now it's going to ramp very, very smoothly away from whatever color I'm at to the ones next to it. So if I move, you see that ramp is very, very blurry. Or I can do the opposite, and I can make the ramp very, very harsh. It does have a limit. I believe it's like 4 degrees, I think it is. It's 3 degrees, actually. So there's a limit. Now we have this gray bar moving across. See that? It kind of, like I said, it kind of demystifies how the tool works. And, of course, I can increase the range. And there you go. Now you can obviously see what we do. These are fun little animations. If I were to pop that over to the 32, there you go. And if we go back to our main area that we were playing with, which was greens. Yeah. Okay. And now we move and we can see how that works. You notice how when we're moving the color data, all the weird ways that it blends together in the different hues and saturations all go away and it becomes a linear gray. When we move all of that. So anyway, let's reset all of this. Okay. Another thing too that helps us, especially in 32, is going to give us an idea. On red, for example, if I were to increase the saturation, if I were to increase the saturation, do you see how in 32, there's actually data in there. There's actually data near the bright areas that seem like it's not there. But what happens if I do that over here? Let's go ahead and reset. Okay. Put it on red and maximize. Okay, it does not do the same thing. As you can see, the colors are already considered maximized in 16. That's as much color as you can get in those luminosity ranges, not on 32-bit. In 32-bit, you can get a lot more, right? So is that useful for you in regular daily editing? Not really. And on top of that, you can't really export from like Lightroom or Capture One into 32 natively. So if you do that, if you export a 16 and convert to 32, you can process things on top of it in 32, but the file itself is not 32, so it's not going to respond like this. This was created inside a 32-bit file using Photoshop's own processes, in this case gradients, right? And because of that, it was actually created at 32-bit, so it responds like this. Your images transferred to 32-bit have some benefit, don't get me wrong, if you want to do it, but I still don't think you should. This is mostly for demonstration purposes. But it's kind of cool seeing how radically different it is from 16 to 32. There's actually data in there. And again, if I were to go to, well, actually, you know what? Let's just go ahead and reset it. Go to our master and change our saturation. See that? Now we get straight bars across. That's how much data is actually in there. And on the 16, if I go to the master and increase saturation, it doesn't even appear to change that much at all. It's considered maximum. It was created with maximum saturated gradients and then blended with other gradients. But basically, it's like, sorry, this is all you got. But in 32-bit, there's exponentially more, and I'm babbling. But anyway, you get the point. What I'm saying is a good way to visualize what tools are doing. One more little quick demo. Let me reset this one because it's sort of kind of wild. Let's say I come over here to our 16, again, something that we use more commonly. Let's go to color balance. Why not? So we go to midtones and add magenta. You kind of see what's happening. I can add green, magenta. The mids are kind of changing there. See that? Again, this helps visualize what's happening. Shadows, let's go ahead and make them more red. All right, more cyan. The pure black doesn't really change. You can probably imagine how this would respond in 32. Let's go to our highlights. Okay, and change it from blue to yellow. You notice how the actual white parts of the highlight don't really change, right? Okay. So let's move that over to our 32. Now that we're here, we're going to crucially turn off preserve luminosity, okay? Because now if I slide over to yellow, you see all that data is actually in the white area. It actually is there. We can bring it back in 32. We can't in 16. So even if I turn off preserve luminosity and go to highlights and go up, there's no color there, okay? That was a way detour on 32 versus 16. I didn't mean to go in that direction. The whole entire point is use a color chart. Maybe we can, I mean, you can find some, but we can provide some. We can provide some files in these different bit depths and color modes if you guys really want, because it's a good way to understand what things are doing. When Dennis showed me, hey, if you put curves on color blend mode and go up and down the RGB, you do like a saturation shift, and I thought that's kind of cool, and I wanted to envision it, and so I did, and it just reminded me that that's a good way to kind of learn what the tools are doing in a very, very visual way, regardless if you're an 8, 16, or 32, or ProPhoto, or sRGB, whatever. It's cool to see the differences, but at the same time, it's just super interesting to understand what the tools are doing, the adjustment layers, and the different blend modes that they're in, and you can just do this endlessly, and it's not going to change how you work. It's going to help you understand what they do, I think, if you really study it and play with it, because then your mind will trigger with, oh, I know what I need. I'm trying to get a cool look to do X. And because I know that this tool does this in this blend mode because I tested it on various color charts, I have a subconscious idea of what that tool does instead of pulling something out and hoping. Now, I'm A or Z. I like to have A, being full control, and I know what a tool is going to do, and I think it might work for what I want, and I try it. And then there's Z, where I don't know what the hell a tool is going to do, or I do know, but I put it in such a way that it's kind of random, and it lets me play and explore. I like to be able to be inspired by random things that take me in a direction I don't expect. That's one of the reasons why we have CGX, because it's cool for just exploring color randomly. But I also like to know what a tool is doing as best I possibly can. In my case, I also like designing actions and panels, so I study this kind of crap all the time. Definitely still a student on it, but it's super, super fun. Anyway, if you want these kind of color charts, let us know, but you can find them online as well. And you can learn a whole lot about how adjustment layers and blend modes work when you see them very literally doing what they do.